Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for High Velocity Radio.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of High Velocity Radio, and this is going to be a good one. Today we have with us Jeff Kirchick, and he is with Nextcaller. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, Lee. Thank you for having me.
Well, before we get too far into things, let's talk about your role at Nextcaller. You're the VP of Enterprise Sales there. Tell us what Nextcaller does and what your role is.
Sure. So I'm sure a lot of the listeners out there have been getting those pesky robo-dials on their phone. And the same mechanism that fraudsters use to place those robo-dials is called caller ID spoofing. It's the same mechanism that fraudsters use to call your bank and pretend to be you and basically take your money. So what I do in my role at Nextcaller is we deliver a product for fraud and authentication for call centers to help them understand whether or not they are truly interacting with the physical device of their customer. So it's a fraud and security tool. We work with many of the Fortune 500 banks, healthcare companies, telecom, et cetera.
So is that kind of those fraudsters, is that fairly easy for them to do, to spoof? Because I get calls that'll mimic maybe the first 3 or 6 digits of my phone number to make it seem like, oh, that's my relative or somebody who is kind of somebody I know. Is that easy to do?
It's a lot easier than it should be. You can basically go and download an app in the App Store. There's many of them that you can download right onto your phone to go ahead and do that. The phenomenon, Lee, that you referenced a moment ago is actually called neighbor spoofing. And that's where they impersonate a local area code so that you're more likely to pick up the phone. And again, these people are very savvy and they use that mechanism to basically impersonate you when they call your financial institution or even your favorite hotel chain to steal all your loyalty points. So it's a rising phenomenon, and there's a big need in the market to fix it.
So now your role with Nextcaller is to sell your service to some of these larger entities, some of these fintech companies, and these ones where privacy is critical?
Pretty much, yeah. So my job is to lead the strategy of the sales team, managing the team, and also selling directly into these accounts to help them protect themselves. And
then what's your backstory? Were you always involved in sales?
Yeah, so I've been working in sales for a little over a decade, kind of fell into it by happenstance, I guess. I was an English major in college and I had a focus in creative writing. So I guess you might not have predicted that I would have ended up in sales, but I always had a strong work ethic and I always believed in myself. So when I came across an opportunity to get into sales and write my own paycheck, as they say, I got pretty excited about that. So spent the bulk of my career at Nextcaller. Nextcaller was started nearly 8 years ago, and as a Y-Combinator company, Y-Combinator being one of the foremost tech incubators in the United States. I had spent some time at a couple tech companies prior to that, but the bulk of my career and about the 10 plus years I've been in sales has been with Nextcaller.
So now, how did you kind of intellectually make the leap from creative to selling? Did you not have any kind of prejudgment of, oh, that's salesy or that's kind of sleazy? Did you have any of those biases going in, or were you pretty open-minded to it?
Yeah, I think I did have some of those biases going in, to be honest. But over the course of my career, I kind of learned that a lot of that stigma was misplaced and that really effective sellers are actually doing the exact opposite of what they are stigmatized for. And in a lot of ways, that was part of the foundation for why I recently wrote a book about sales, and which is really predicated around authenticity, because we attach this negative stigma to sales, even though pretty much every situation you go through in your life, if you think about it, is a sales situation. We don't think about it that way, but there's really no difference between, say, the used car salesman, the stereotypical used car salesman, and the college admissions counselor. The college admissions counselor, if you were applying to college, you actually viewed that person as someone that you had to sell yourself to. And that might be true, but that person was also selling you on trying to go to that school. And so I'd use that just as an example, but in reality, there's really not a difference between any of us as salespeople. We're constantly negotiating for ourselves, negotiating with others. That's something that I've learned through my work and something that I've been writing about recently.
Yeah, and I'll even take it a step further. I think that you're doing it when you're with your friends and deciding what restaurant you want to eat dinner at.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that, because a lot of the examples I use in the book are about, how if you and your friend had a disagreement about, where you wanted to go to eat, how would you handle that situation? So very mundane and very banal situations can be sales situations. And again, our brain has this way of playing a trick on us where we view some people as being overtly salespeople, and then we just view other people as being everyday people. And the reality is, we're all salespeople. And I think the more that people, start to understand that, the better off they'll be.
Right, I agree 100%. I think sales skills are, kind of critical skills, and they're must-have skills for everybody in every organization, because everybody's selling something, whether it's persuading your boss to do the project that you want to do or go down a different route. You're all trying to kind of sell your way or your line of thinking in multiple situations every single day, all day long.
Yep, pretty much. It's something that, something that I think I realized recently, and was one of the motivations to write about it was, actually the lack of salesmanship that I've been noticing too. I think that, it's no secret to a lot of people that our political dialogue has been very fractured, and it's very difficult for people to have conversations with each other these days. A lot of times people assume that other people are evil if they disagree with you. And that made me kind of upset. And I'll be honest, I kind of thought to myself, watching how much people were making fun of each other, or, making memes to mischaracterize what people think, or, even our politicians are like tweeting things at each other, trying to burn each other on social media. I kind of thought to myself, man, like none of these people have sales acumen, like our dialogue would be better if they did. If people were less interested in just being right all the time, or like making their point, they would be way better off. And salespeople, to their credit, are very used to having their ideas rejected all the time. Getting your ideas, getting a no is kind of par for the course in selling. And so when people reject your ideas, if you're in sales, you might have a little more patience because you're used to it. But also good sellers are empathetic people. They're inclined to listen. When I ask people, when I hire new employees and I ask them, what do you think is the most important thing the trait to have in sales? No one ever knows the answer. They guess that you need to have good presentation skills, you need to be personable, this or that. And the correct answer is listening, because selling is about the customer. It's not about you. And that's a really tough thing for people to absorb, because they have to put their ego aside and their own, kind of selfish desires, and put that aside for the interest of somebody else. So in a lot of ways, it's very counterintuitive. Great salespeople are actually very, I think, altruistic people. They want to help other people. Their job is to help other people see a better way for themselves. And, that's something that I hope that that's a message that I hope people can take to heart, because if we start to care more about adopting that sales mindset and have a little more authenticity in our interactions, we will have a much healthier dialogue across the board than what we have today.
Yeah, I think that sales needs a better PR team, because I think that there's a huge misconception that selling is me tricking you, or somehow I'm selling you something that you don't want, and there's such negativity around it, and that's not the case. A good salesperson is just trying to listen, like you said, and solve a problem. And if you're the solution, great. If you're not the solution, great too. I mean, you're just trying to help people, and if your service or product works, then it's almost your duty to tell them about it. And if they don't buy it, that's, you can still be friends. Like, it doesn't have to be we're killing each other at the end of this. You're able to interact with someone in a meaningful way and try to help them. And if your service can help them, great. If it can't, that's great too. Good luck.
Yeah, I think we often associate sales with persuasion. And when you hear the word persuasion, I think there's a connotation with it that you're kind of getting somebody to do something that they don't want to do or that they would not otherwise be inclined to do. And that's not exactly right. I'm not really proud to tell the story, but I said in like another recent interview around the idea of persuasion, it's really about, sometimes people can't see that something's good for them, and you have to help them see that. And the example I was going to get to is like, I had this girlfriend when I was in college who was just like a bad girlfriend, let's just say. And all my friends would tell me, it was a bad relationship for me. They were trying to persuade me to move on with my life. And sometimes people are stubborn, they don't want to listen, and that was me. I didn't listen, and I had to learn the hard way. But a lot of times persuasion can be rooted in interest for the other person. Your best friends will often try to persuade you to do things for yourself out of concern. If you have a family member who's an addict, you'll persuade them to go to rehab. They might not want to go, but it doesn't change that it's the best thing for them to do. So good selling is really rooted in the interest of the other person. You don't really gain much a lot of times in effective selling. Obviously, if you work in a traditional sales role, you stand to make a commission. And I think that that's what makes it hard for salespeople to be successful, is because they do have a selfish interest in their own success. It can be hard for them to truly empathize with the customer. It can be hard for them to put themselves in a situation where they kind of remove what's at stake for them personally and think solely about the other person. So there's a lot that goes into this, and yeah, I think everything you said about it is absolutely correct.
Right, but I think the best salespeople are the ones that I don't mind them being compensated for what they do, and they should be compensated because it's hard work, and that not a lot of people can do it really well. But if they have the success of the client in mind and are truly trying to have the client or potential client attain that success, whatever it may be, then I believe that they're going to get theirs. If they are just there as a great source of information and maybe using some persuasion skills and tools to help reframe or reposition whatever it is they're selling, to open the mind of somebody who may not be aware or may not truly understand what the service or product is, I think they're going to get theirs in the end. But it's the people that are trying to take advantage of people or try to force a bad fit. Those are the people that kind of ruin it for everybody else.
I think so. And in my experience, I think that, this all kind of comes out in the wash. And what I mean by that is the people that really do have good intentions in the long run do succeed. The people that don't have great intentions, they might be able to fool a couple people, but their reputation will precede them. And that's been my experience. I've had a lot of customers say to me something to the effect of, I really felt all along that you were really trying to help me, and that's one of the reasons why we're working with you. And that's really the best compliment you can get in sales. That's the way that I want people to feel, because honestly, and I'm not just blowing smoke here. The most rewarding part of my job is the idea that I feel like I help somebody. When I hear a customer that has a great success story, and I know that I'm responsible for, maybe not solely responsible, but I go maybe play a large role in helping them to realize whatever benefit they've received, it feels like I've created value for the world. So I do think that there is a karmic element to this, where the people that have the right mentality, they end up doing great. And, that's translated as well into, other little things. Sometimes I'll invite a prospect to a dinner and they'll say, we're already working with your competitor, so I feel guilty, accepting your invitation. And I'll like laugh at them. I'll be like, what, you think I'm inviting you just because like I want, your business or something? Like, a lot of times it's about relationship building. It's about putting people together in a room. That alone provides value. If I can put my customers in a room with other like-minded people, they'll be grateful for that, even if the other folks work with our competitor. So my job is, if I'm doing it right, is to always be looking out for the best interests of my customers. And if that means that there are some things that I have to do from time to time that are uncomfortable, or if it means that I have to be okay with not closing a deal all the time, then so be it. But I do believe in the long run that it works out. It's worked out for me, and I think others who adopt that mindset works out for them as well.
So now we're talking a lot about your book, Authentic Selling, How to Use the Principles of Sales in Everyday Life. Did something happen where you're like, I have to write some of this down? Like, was there an event or was there a catalyst moment for you where you were like, I got a lot of knowledge here and maybe people aren't getting it, and maybe if I wrote it down, more people would understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I would say there's two things. So I already mentioned one of them, and that was, just how messy our political dialogue has been for the last several years, and especially during the pandemic. I thought to myself, I was getting frustrated, honestly, a little bit depressed, sitting inside all day, watching my friends yell at each other on social media, calling each other, snowflakes and racists and things like that. You never, rule 101 or sales 101 here. It's like, if you call somebody names or call someone stupid, they're not going to adopt your ideas. In fact, they're probably going to double down on the opposite idea of whatever you like, because they want to spite you at that point. So that was number one. But number two is also just a more pragmatic reason. Machine learning and artificial intelligence are taking over a lot of different industries. Automation is a big thing right now. Leading up to the presidential election, Andrew Yang talked a lot about the trucking industry being in peril due to these self-driving vehicles. Uber and Lyft might not need to have drivers, like human drivers, in the near-term future because they have self-driving vehicles. Elon Musk has made the Tesla be able to drive itself. And so even in the sales world, you'll see that there are a lot of technologies that automate what were once traditional sales functions. And so what I argue in the book is that machine learning and artificial intelligence are going to create scenarios where salespeople can be replaced by machines, because a lot of the sales training programs you learn, whether it's Sandler training or Medic or BANT, there's these formal sales training programs. They have a list of rules of what you're supposed to say and do. So you can program a machine with a set of rules, but what you can't program a machine with is humanity. Your authenticity is unique to you. The way that you honestly present yourself is unique to you. And people, they build trust through authenticity. In other words, if people feel that you're presenting yourself honestly, they will trust you. And it doesn't matter if you're weird. Look at Dennis Rodman as an example. Dennis Rodman is probably known more for what he did off the basketball court than on the basketball court, because he's a strange guy. But we know that he was presenting an honest version of himself. He didn't pretend to be someone that he wasn't. And people actually almost kind of admired him for that. So what I argue in the book here is that authenticity matters because A, if you want to keep your job against the machine, it's your biggest weapon. But two, authenticity just matters inherently because authenticity is what builds trust, and trust is fundamental to sales.
Right. I think that's at the heart of this. The way to separate yourself from everybody else, first of all, is by being authentically you, because there is no competition in that. And also that you have to have an edge over the machines, and the edge better be your humanity. You better be doing something that the machine can't do. And right now, we're a little bit ahead, but like you said, so many of the tasks leading up to the sale are getting automated. You better get good at the parts that can't be automated.
That's exactly right, and I think that translates to every career path. I think it translates to pretty much everything. I mean, you can imagine that automation can affect almost every industry. When I go into CVS now, there's a self-checkout. There used to be that you would go to the cashier. There's no toll booth manager anymore. There's Easy Pass. So, we'll maybe teaching is going to become automated. I mean, we already have Zoom school. So at what point do we not need teachers anymore? But what I would argue is that there is something unique. Now, teachers are able to build very unique relationships with students. There's a value in that, right? A machine can't build that type of authentic relationship with a student. It can teach the same curriculum potentially, but can it really ask the student the questions? Can it get to know that person, and can it relate to that person in the same way? The answer is no, and it will never be true. And so the authenticity piece of this is that, it's so crucial, and it's not just sales, it's really every industry. And I think the more and more that people feel at ease with themselves, the better. It's unfortunate, but this younger generation is wildly addicted to social media. There's, I think suicide rates amongst young teenage girls are higher than they've ever been, in large part due to social media. And a lot of that is because you see that young people are presenting versions of themselves that are not true, right? They don't have the confidence to present an authentic version of themselves. What they do instead is they present a version of themselves that is exaggerated or overtly good. And it makes other people feel like they're not good enough. And this is again an example of, when we lose our authenticity, when we pretend to be things that we are not, the repercussions are actually very serious. People, they get depressed, and it's a big problem. So the more and more that people can get on board with the idea that being your authentic self is a good thing, even if you have problems. Everyone has problems, our lives wouldn't have meaning unless we were all solving problems. If you imagine a world where you got out of bed every day and you had no problems, you'd actually probably be pretty unhappy. It's problems, like solving problems is what brings us joy. So the sooner that people understand that we all have problems, that being flawed is okay, presenting an honest version of ourselves is a good thing, we're all better off for it.
Well, I think that somewhere along the line, people have kind of forgotten the big why of why we're doing these things and how important other people are. And it's not all about you. And you don't have to make yourself look perfect. We're all imperfect, and we're doing the best we can. And that I think that if people included some grace and just some truth into some of the way they're presenting themselves and acting, there would be a lot less of that kind of friction that we're having, like you said, all throughout in all different aspects of our lives and internally as well. I think we make things a lot harder because we're trying to be something that isn't real rather than just being kind of honest about the moment and the reality of it, the good and the bad, the ugly of it.
I think so too. And I think that's well stated. And one thing that I've done that I think has helped me to try to understand others better, or to really, really, I guess, quote unquote, peel the onion. You actually kind of said the word a second ago, Lee, is why, the power of why. Simon Sinek is the author who wrote the book Start With Why, and his whole premise is about how people don't really care about what you do, they care about why you do it. And I agree with that. The why, when you ask people why they do things, if you ask them that question enough times, you're able to get really deep on what actually motivates them, and you're able to really understand truly who they are. Something I talk about in the book is this phenomenon of the 5 whys, where, and the example I give is like, if you were to ask me why I work in sales, I would tell you it's because I want to make a lot of money. And your immediate, your judgment of me based on that answer would be, oh, well, it sounds like Jeff's this materialistic guy. He's, selfish guy or whatever. And if you ask me again, maybe I tell you that I want to make a lot of money so that I can afford to be a writer. And then if you ask me why again, perhaps I tell you that writing makes me feel like I can touch other people's lives, and you keep going on. And perhaps I tell you I went to this high school where the motto was, from those to whom much has been given, much will be expected. And ultimately you ask me why, a final time. And I tell you that impacting other people's lives means more to me than anything I could possibly do for myself. And Lee, the reason I tell the story is because when you asked me why I work in sales the first time, I told you, well, I want to make a lot of money. But after you've asked me the question 5 times repeatedly, we actually ended up somewhere completely different. The reason I want to work in sales is because it will afford me the opportunity to impact the lives of others. And that doing so will bring me more joy than buying myself a new car, let's say. And, that I think it's a fascinating kind of exercise to do with people. I mean, you don't want to annoy them and just ask why over and over again. But, if you're able to sit them down and to kind of peel the onion and, kind of get beneath the surface level, you'll often be surprised about what makes somebody tick. And even for people that are somewhat superficial, that don't want to let on, who they really are, if you can sit them down to have that conversation, chances are they will start to trust you and open up to you simply because you're asking the question. A lot of times we don't even get as far as to ask people why. Someone might have a reprehensible opinion or political opinion that we disagree with. Instead of asking them why, what do we do instead? We say, but you're wrong, or how could you believe that thing, which is not even a real question. It's just an accusation, So the more that people can actually put their judgment aside on what they think someone is and actually ask them and let them tell you for themselves, that's a powerful thing. What's tough is that our human instinct is to protect ourselves. So it's to kind of defend our own ideas rather than to hear why someone else is the way that they are. But if we could all be a little more patient, I know it's easier said than done, but if we could be a little more patient, ask each other why, and ask it enough times, I think most people will find that the intentions of others are usually very, very good.
Well, it's a couple points to that. I think when you said your first question of I want to make a lot of money, and if my first answer is, you must, or my first thinking is, you must want a lot of money because you're greedy or because you're materialistic, that's about me. I'd ask them why they thought that was what I would do with the money, number one, because that's, I believe that if you have a lot of money, that gives you more opportunity to help more people. So that's when I first hear he has a lot of money, then I'm like, imagine all the good he's going to be able to do with that money. But people have the biases to begin with, and their own kind of view of their worldview is not always the purest of heart. And people tend to forgive themselves when they get off the mark or they say the wrong thing or they do the wrong thing, but they're way less forgiving of other people when they do the same exact behavior. And so if we can get a little more empathy into the mix and be a little more patient and give people more grace, I think that the world will just chill out a little bit.
I'm with you. I if I could start a movement, and I don't know if I have the clout to do it, but I'd like to try, it would be that word you just said, the big E word, empathy. There's a difference between accepting someone's ideas and accepting how they came to the ideas. In other words, what I often find is that people will draw a conclusion that the only way that you could have a different idea is because you are evil or, because you are this certain thing. And what we should be able to do is be able to say, I strongly disagree with you, but I also recognize that you grew up with a different set of circumstances than I did. You were exposed to different information. You were molded in a different way. And that there are legitimate reasons why you were able to get from point A to point B in your thought process that have to do with those differing circumstances rather than you being an evil person. What we need to be able to do is not necessarily accept other people's ideas. When I say that accept, I mean agree with them. You don't have to agree with people, but we should be able to not reflexively assume that people are not well-intended. I worked with a leadership coach. I was looking for help on, just dealing with conflict in general. And she gave me a good piece of advice. And it's a very simple piece of advice. She said, people do not try to suck on purpose. And first, I just want to say, I don't think that anyone who disagrees with me or does anything wrong sucks. I don't want to, I think that would be a pretty egotistical way to look at it. But I think what her feedback is that when you find yourself in a situation where someone is upsetting you, you should remind yourself that that person did not wake up that morning with a poster of you on their wall and like a dartboard, thinking about how they're going to mess up your day. They're probably not trying. There's probably a good reason why they were able to get to a different conclusion. So I'm with you on that. And I hope that we can get to a better place in terms of adopting empathy as one of our key traits.
Yeah. And if we can kind of turn off the, that everybody is good and everybody's evil and it's one or the other, there's a lot of gray area and a lot of people just have a different life experience than you do. And what they see, I think it's Scott Adams says it's one film, two screens. Like we're all looking maybe at the same thing, but we're seeing two different things. And I think that happens a lot more than people realize.
Yeah, I agree. And it's unfortunately gotten to a point where the polarization is the worst it's ever been. So if there's ever a time for people to be thinking about this, it's right now. And I would encourage people to practice it, and the next time they have a conversation with someone, and to think about what are some questions that I can ask to better understand what this person is saying, rather than just being right. We have this idea, and I think it's biological, just being human beings. We have this self-preservation, mechanism where I think it trickles its way into dialogue where, if people disagree with us, we want to make sure that we're right. We're very invested in being right about things. And the thing is that, not to sound too weird here, Lee, or whatever, but we really don't know why we're even here on planet Earth. We don't really know what our purpose is. We're like specks of dust in the universe. So when you're able to kind of put things in perspective in that way, it actually becomes a little bit easier to basically have some non-attachment to your ideas, to be able to not have to be right, to be able to want to listen to others, because at the grand scheme of things, it's not the end all be all.
Amen to that. And it's I took a class, Alt MBA through Seth Godin. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Yep. But one of the exercises in the class was for us to pretend we're our competitor and sell against ourselves. So how would I sell my competitor? Like, how could I, just take the opposite point of view and just kind of lean into what are all the ways that my competitor is way better. So if people can take their thinking, whatever the subject or topic, and just kind of preach about the other side and just try to sell that as hard as you can, all of a sudden that opens up some little empathy, little roots to grow and understand maybe where they're coming from or why their line of thinking may be not so crazy to them. It might be crazy to you, but you can at least understand where they're coming from and where it kind of was born from. And maybe that'll give you a deeper understanding and more patience for those people. Yeah.
And, it's also a better way of selling your ideas too. Like, not that should necessarily be your goal, but I talk about this idea called inception. In the movie Inception, there's this, not to spoil it for anybody, but there's a guy who wants another guy to dissolve his company. And instead of telling him to dissolve his company, he hires a band of thieves to basically infiltrate the other guy, the person's dreams, and to plant an idea in his mind that he should dissolve his company. So it's a passive approach. So Inception is this idea that people will come to the conclusion on their own. Like you help. The analogy I give is that you're the Sherpa taking them up Mount Everest. You're not there to do the heavy lifting. You're just there to show them the way to the top of the mountain. And really good selling is not in your face. In other words, Lee, if I said, "Hey, Lee, I need you to go do this thing." If you don't want to do that thing, you're probably going to be like, "Well, hell no, man. I don't want to do that thing. It's because it's not your idea. It's my idea. And I'm telling you to do this thing." But if you and I are having a conversation and I'm able to show you through some, through our conversation where I don't really have an agenda that this thing might be good for you, you might naturally be inclined to go ahead and do it just because, from speaking with me and learning about it, you became interested and excited about it. People generally don't like being told to adopt ideas. People like being able to get to ideas on their own. And so I find that when you don't have as much of an agenda in your conversation with someone, if you have something good for them, they should come to see that on their own if you don't push it on them. People don't like being told how to think about things. And, I think the more that it's funny because I see all my friends and people on social media all the time telling everyone how dumb they are as if that's going to somehow change their mind. And again, that stuff never works. Telling people that they're stupid or that they need to think the same way as you, all it does is it fosters resentment and polarization. If you want people to come to the conclusions, come to better conclusions, you should do it through inception. They should come to that conclusion on their own. And if you have a good solution for them, chances are they will.
And then also understand that sometimes when they're doing that, that isn't their objective, is to persuade them. It might be just to get their own teammates to say, yeah, that's the way, you really showed him. Like they might be doing it for status reasons for within their own subgroup rather than persuade any other person. That could be some performance art.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, Jeff, if somebody wants to get their hands on the book, Authentic Selling, How to Use the Principles of Sales in Everyday Life, where can they go?
Book is available on Amazon.com, currently in Kindle and hardcover format. The Audible version will be released shortly, so Amazon.com for the book.
And if you're getting sick and tired of people spoofing and calls and getting under your skin, and you're in fintech or you're in one of those kind of industries where that stuff not only gets annoying, but it matters, how can they get a hold of you and learn more about Nextcaller?
Yeah, they can reach me at jeff@nextcaller.com. That's JEFF at nextcaller.com.
And nextcaller.com is the website for the firm?
That's correct.
All right, Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your story. You're doing important work, and we appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Lee. I enjoyed the conversation.
All right, this is Lee Cantor. We'll see you next time on High Velocity Radio.